Hey, Jules here, and welcome back to Jules FM. Today's guest is someone whose story I've been really excited to share. I've known Vikki for at least 10 years now, but to see how she's flourished and grown into being one of Australia's most respected true crime authors, with more than 20 books to her name, and her work has reached millions of people around the world, is unbelievable. She's also a key writer on one of Australia's most respected true crime podcasts, with over 10 million downloads. And one of her books has been adapted into a television miniseries, which is no small feat. But what I love most about Vikki's story isn't just what she's achieved. It's how she's done it. In this first part of our conversation, we talk less about crime and much more about persistence, trusting yourself, backing your instincts, and committing to something because you feel called to it, not because it guarantees an outcome. It's a conversation about doing the work, saying yes before you know exactly how, and believing that if you keep showing up, the path reveals itself. I think this episode will resonate deeply, especially with students, creatives, and anyone quietly working towards something that matters to them. Let's get into it. Vikki, tell me, what drew you into writing in the first place? Like, how did you get into it?
Personally think that a writer is born. It's not something that you go, "Oh, that's what I'll pick." I just think from the minute I was old enough to read, to hear stories, I was mesmerized, and you're really drawn to it. And I remember once when I was in prep, the teacher was reading The Wishing Chair, right? Enid Blyton. And I would go home. I shared a room with my sister, and I would go home. She was 4, I was 5, and I would retell the chapter to her as a bedtime story. And I didn't kind of realize that that was a bit of a gift until I became a teacher, and kids don't really recall whole chapter. Like, I didn't do it word for word, but I would retell the story. And I loved the word chapter, and every day we'd read a chapter, and that was my favorite moment of the day. And I think it's a natural thing that you just go, one day I will do this. I will be a storyteller. So it started very young. And I think then it's only a matter of, what do I wanna write? So I guess I've wanted to do this since I was very young.
So, I loved The Wishing Chair. I think it was probably my favourite book as a little kid too. It was so, enchanting and exciting. So I get it. But why then true crime? Because that is a long way from The Wishing Chair. Like, what made you get into that?
Loved so when I was in year 7, and again, this is a library story. So I went to the Kilbreda College Library and I found an Agatha Christie. So Sparkling Cyanide, first Agatha Christie I ever read. And if you look at my shelves, like down that way, at the very top shelf is all of the Agatha Christies that I've collected over the years. And I read that and I was hooked on crime fiction. And so I read every single Agatha Christie and then made it my life mission to collect every single Agatha Christie book. I think she'd written 77 of them or something. And so when I first started out to write, I was only like 18 or 19 doing a lit major at college. And I thought, I want to write a crime fiction set in Melbourne. And then when you start to write, when you sit down and like Once Upon a Time and you start to do it, and then you go, oh, I now understand the deficits in my knowledge, right? So I knew that I didn't know why people killed, I didn't know about criminal motivation. And so I literally bought a book called Inside the Mind of a Murderess, and I read that, and hoping to get an insight into why someone might kill. And it was about Myra Hindley, the Moore murders in England. So Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. And I read a book about that. And once you read true crime, it is so powerful. So I just thought I have to write this. And then I bought another book called literally How to Write and Sell True Crime. And it was by a true crime author. And I literally followed the recipe. So he says, find a case that's got lots of and then, and then, and then. and go to the coroner's court, get the file. From the file, you get the names, contact the cops. And I literally just went step one, step two, and just followed this author's guidelines and stumbled my way through it. Because when you want to do something, you'll find a way.
Very true. Absolutely. So, even from that early stage, then, once you found the true crime and you were looking into that, is that when you decided this is a career path I want to follow? Like this is going to be what I want to do?
Think for me, it was never about a career path, right? So for me, it was about I want to write books. And it wasn't, I had no expectation that I would make any money out of it. That didn't matter. It wasn't a consideration. And it was all for me, it was about I have the ability and the power to tell these stories in a way that other people will read them, and I think these stories need to be told. And so it didn't have anything to do with career, it didn't need to make any money. I worked full-time as teacher, so the bills were paid, and I think that with the first one that did make money, I mean, it was a surprise, but, um when I wrote the book on the Frankston serial killer, and that was a bestseller within about 3 weeks. And because I'd self-published it, because no publisher would touch it, we don't publish that kind of thing. I had already written 2 books, and so I knew that it would sell, but publishers were very risk averse. So I took out a bank loan and I took out a bank loan for $20,000 back in 1994,
That's a lot.
which it was a lot of money. Like, that
Mm.
was a car back then. I suppose it's a car now, but I think it was a new car back then.
Yeah.
Um, but it was interesting because I thought I'd calculated I had to sell 2,300 books to break even, and I was really confident that I could do that to pay back the loan, and we sold 5,000 copies in the first 3 weeks. That one went gangbusters, and I
Oh,
always tell people my favorite rejection letter was from Penguin, that it was on the same day that it made the top 10 in The Age at number 2 after Helen Garner, so that's fair enough,
fair.
and it made number 2 in the bestseller list the same day I got the rejection letter from Penguin going, "Yeah, we won't, publish that, but, good luck finding someone who will." And I'm like, "Well, Penguin, actually, I didn't need to because I published it myself." And that book has never been out of print for, what was it, 95 it came out, so 30 years this year, and it's never been out of print.
Tell me, did you go back to Penguin and say, here's another opportunity, or did you just go, you're done, I'm going to find another publisher now? Or did they ever contact you? What happened there?
Didn't ever go back to them because I believe that you send it off to a publisher, and 6 months later you might get the rejection letter, and by then I had already decided to self-publish, and it was number 2, and we were getting orders of hundreds and hundreds a day. In Frankston, it sold thousands. The book launch was covered in the top 3 stories on Channel 7, 9, and 10. So there was a press conference at the book launch. I'd never seen anything like it. And I think for me, it's not about going backwards and saying to Penguin, "Well, you missed an opportunity
Yeah.
there." It is about, all of those publishers would have known how many it sold because of BookScan. And I remember a friend of mine at the time, he got a publishing deal, probably the year Frankston came out in 95, and their first print run was 10,000 copies on the strength of the sale of Frankston. So publishers knew. I didn't have to turn around and say, "Hey, look." Publishers were well aware of what it was doing and how well it was doing, and from that, the doors opened from complete rejection across the board to writers that came after me getting these big publishing deals because of what Frankston had done. And Frankston was one of the first. I think I had, Andrew Rule's Cuckoo, and I had Tom Noble's Untold Violence, Crime in Melbourne Today, and really there wasn't a lot of crime happening. And
Mm.
after Frankston, you had the Peter Falconio, and I think 4 books came out in the days after the trial, to now I think there was 3 professional books of the Mushroom Tapes, and I think a couple of other online ones that writers had put together, but, now if a crime happens here, there's plenty of books that come out. And Frankston
Mm.
started that. I'm not saying it was because of Frankston, but Frankston started the trend.
Yep. So now I'm thinking you were teaching at that point, but was that a turning point? Was that when you went, wow, actually, maybe I could do this full time?
Doing it full time because it was very the income from it was fits and spurts,
Okay.
and it was always I don't know, and in those days, I think that we were very quick to say, "Oh, I don't wanna make money out of it." Like, I'm not doing
Yeah.
it for the money because you're working with such, um, awful topics that I would
Mm.
tend to not give it away, but, like, my sister-in-law's brother lived overseas, and I bought him a plane ticket to come and visit her because she hadn't seen him for years, and it was almost like for me that money needed to be spent on something really positive to counterbalance, but, I mean, I've changed my mind about that because I think that why shouldn't you make money out of your writing? If I take a year to write a book, why shouldn't you earn an income from that? And if people wanna read books, then authors have to be paid. So I think now and if I hear it, I jump on people that say it like, "I don't wanna make any money out of it." And I'm like, "Why not?" Like, this is a skill. If you were a plumber or a cleaner, you would expect to make money. And I think that that's something that it's my job now. But I never thought of it as a career substitute because I always wanted to be free to choose the kind of books that I wanted to write. So one of my books was on child abuse, and I wrote it with the head of the child exploitation squad at the Victoria Police. And I just thought if I sell 5 copies of that book, it's still worth it because it was a book to help parents protect their children from child predators. And that subject is big now, right? But, back then it wasn't talked about. We had stranger danger in schools, and we didn't really talk about it. And I had this amazing experience that I've never forgotten where I was a past pupil of distinction at Kilbreda. And I get invited to this ceremony for past pupils of distinction. And they read my bio, and then in the audience, a past pupil of distinction, Dr. Mayumi Purvis, she's in the audience. Now, we were never there at the same time, and they read my bio. And when she stands up to accept her award, she goes, "I can't believe Vikki Petraitis is in the audience because I read Rock Spider." That was the book I wrote on child predators. She goes, "When I was 20, and because of that book, I became a forensic psychologist and worked with offenders and some of them that were in that book." And I went up to her afterwards and I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
And she said and I said to her, "I wrote that book and I thought if it helps one person, I will be happy." And she said, "Well, I've trained thousands over the years, and they've trained thousands of people to work with predators and to try and address recidivism and to work within the system." And I'm just that kind of thing blows me away. And when people talk about success, how can you get more successful than
Oh,
that? And
yeah.
I didn't even know that had happened. That was happening in the background because of one of my books. And, that those moments are just, yeah, they're incredible.
It's probably why you're doing it. And if you had to put into a sentence or an explanation, what would you say your why is? So I think you kind of in that story shares it, but if you had to put it into a sentence?
I think the why is because I can. It's as simple as that. And if you are able to do something that really stretches your ability and stretches your talent, you do it. You say yes to it and you do it because you can. I always say to students, and I still do a little bit of teaching, but I always say to students, what is the best use of your smarts? And any of us could do, I mean, when I was, raising money and I had a baby and um, before I started writing, I cleaned houses, I worked at pubs, when you're at uni, and we can all do those jobs. I do those jobs really well. But is it the best use of my smarts? And for me, it's always been about let's push the talent, let's push the ability. And if you can do it, why wouldn't you? And so that's why I've just finished a PhD, and I didn't do it to get a job, like get a job at a university or anything. I did it because a bunch of my friends had done, a bunch of writer friends had done it. And it's like, I think I could do that. I think I could use my intelligence, my research skills, my writing skills. And that saying yes to that really changed my life, because that was when, after 25 years of writing true crime, I decided to write fiction, go back to my origins and put all of this true crime knowledge, because by then I did know why people killed and I did know why people committed crimes, and put all of that into fiction. And that was my PhD novel. And that won a major publishing award with Allen and Unwin, their inaugural crime fiction prize. And then within 6 months of it being out, we had signed a TV deal, which has just been announced, thank goodness, because I wasn't allowed to
Amazing.
talk about it. But
That's
literally
amazing.
a TV, like a movie producer in the UK, the movie company that had made Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris and A Gentleman in Moscow, so they had lots of wins on the board, and the head producer, Xavier Marchand, walked into a bookstore and bought the book and went, "We have to make this into a TV series." And he gave it to the actor Anna Torv, and she read it and loved it and said, "I wanna play Antigone Pollard, I wanna play that character." And fast forward 2 years later, me and my family are walking on set to be extras in the TV series. And so I think by that stage, um, that was when I stopped teaching. I quit my full-time job. I'd started podcasting, so I took a job with Casefile, and I made a couple of podcast series. We've had 10 million downloads now. So just by following your passion, and it was never about chasing success. It was always about, when the Casefile host said, "Oh, do you want to make a podcast?" And I'm like, "Sure, I've never done it before, but I'll figure it out." And I trust myself as a learner, and I just jumped right in. And, within, I think within a couple of days, we'd had like 47,000 downloads. And
Mhm.
I think it came out in the early November, and then by the January, we'd had 1 million downloads. And that just, to me, was like, what? Um, it's never a motivator. It's exciting in the background, but it's never the motivator, because the minute I finish that, the case file host is like, "Right, what are you gonna do next?" And so I'm already working on the next one. And, all to tell good stories. And, the next one was Sarah McDermott, who had been missing at that stage for 30 years, taken from the Cannonock railway station. And I literally just got a message today from someone in Wales saying, "I just listened to Sarah McDermott. My dad's a cop, was a cop, and he um, would investigate cold cases." And having a conversation about Sarah from Wales, where she would never have known about that case if I didn't make that podcast. And so these are the kind of unexpected delights that happen when you connect with people across the world that you would never have connected with. And it's not connecting because they like me or they're not fangirling me. It's connecting because they will see something in the case that they'll say, "Have you thought of this or have you thought of that?" And that's what it's all about. It's never about me. It's always about the story.
But so many opportunities that have just come about. And I'm such a believer in this, that when you are just following your passion or doing what you do and what you love, that, and you're in the moment, that things, opportunities come to you, doors open. And it sounds like you've had so many opportunities outside of writing because you were just doing what you love and what you do.
Yep. It's all about the storytelling, Jules.
Yeah.
You just tell the stories, and that's what I've always been on about. And it was funny, when I was quite young, when I was a baby writer, I think Frankston had just come out, and so I was probably about 29 or maybe 30, and I did a ride along with the Herald Sun police rounds, right? And when I walked in, they would listen to the police radio in the background in the newsroom, and something would crackle, and they'd go, "Oh, what's that? What's that?" And they'd all stop talking and they'd all listen. And if a reporter came in, he'd say, "Oh, I'm gonna cover XYZ," and they would always ask the same question. They'd go, "Good yarn?" And he'd go, "Good yarn." And that was their benchmark. Was it a good yarn? And I think that probably became my benchmark that, if a crime happens, like we had a couple of crimes in our street and people are like, "Oh, you're gonna write about it." It's like, not a good yarn. If it's just, I don't know, men beating each other up or whatever. There's not a book in that. It's, unfortunately quite common and quite regular. So there's a quality and criteria to a good yarn, and I guess that's what you're always looking out for. Is it a good yarn?
Tell me, have you ever discovered something in your research that the police have missed? Like, because it almost sounds like you're an investigative kind of researcher. Like, have you ever helped them solve a case or anything like that?
Yeah, they're two quite different questions. So the answer is yes,
Yes.
absolutely. I've found things that they have missed,
Hmm.
particularly in old cases. But this is the problem, and this is actually the subject of my next book, which is out in at the end of January, is that the police, um, won't I think it's hard to put into words, but from my experience, the police look at people like me and they go, "What would you know? You're just a writer." And they won't act on or listen to stuff that I have to say. And so we've had this really interesting situation with the Phillip Island murder, which was my first podcast, The Vanishing of Vivian Cameron. And we had a flood of information come forward, and not all of it's relevant. So I'm the filter for that. And I take very careful research notes on anyone that contacts me. But I had two witnesses that came forward that can potentially, blow this case out of the water, and we can't even get police to take their statements. So we try and do it the right way. Like, I'm not rushing to print. I'm a book writer. I'm not a journalist. And so this was about 2 years ago. So we applied to the coroner to get access to the files, to look at the case again. It took, I think about 9 months for the police to actually get in touch with these two witnesses who were very willing to talk. One of them's an ex-copper himself, and with really important information, particularly about potentially a grave. And the police just won't. They listened and, yeah, nah, mate, it's too old, or we're not going to act on that. And so after the 2 years, when the coroner finally said, "No, you can't have access to the files, we're not going to do anything with this case," and the cold case are like, "No, we're not going to take statements," it's like, right, it needs another book. And so that's what I've done with this new book, to really challenge the police to say, well, the information's out there and now it's up to you. And if you can't do it because it's your job, then
Yeah.
maybe do it because of pressure, because there's a book out there.
Really don't understand why they wouldn't be open to information regardless of where it comes from. And not only that, why did they miss it and you found it? I don't get it.
Really disturbing. It's
Yeah,
really disturbing,
it
and I
is.
think it's an attitude thing. I think in the Phillip Island case, we've found out that the police got to the Phillip Island murder on the day that it happened. They drew conclusions about who the offender was, and they never changed their mind. So they said, "Oh, there's a murdered woman on Phillip Island. It must have been the wife of the man she was having an affair with who's vanished." And so it was case closed the day they went there. And so any investigation then and since has always been about to go, "Yeah, we were right. It was her." And so I found information that suggests maybe it wasn't her, maybe it was someone else, and the police do not wanna know about it. And I think in the olden days, there's a bit of, in some cases, the path of least resistance. And if you get an outcome, "Oh, it's the vanished woman, let's make it her," then you don't have to do any more work.
Yeah, case closed.
Case closed. And so that case, but, it comes back to haunt them because I'm not gonna let it go, and
No.
I've been looking at this case for 35 years, and this is after one book, a podcast series. We did a sensing murder episode, we did another investigation episode. It's like, I'm not gonna let it go, and I'll keep looking at it, and then I become the conduit for information. And so you have to do something with it, otherwise the case die, and then people rely on you to do something with it. And so it's like, well, here's another book on it, and this has all the information that's come forward. And I feel like Victoria Police either listen to it or they don't. But what else can I do?
Absolutely.
Um,
And then
yeah.
you've also got all your thousands of readers or tens of thousands of readers who are like, we know this, why isn't someone acting? So hopefully that pressure will also, make the police do something, motivate them to look into it further, or who knows.
Found not only with the police, but I found this to be true often in business and in life, and certainly working with sex offenders who were offending within institutions. Institutions often will not do the right thing for the right reasons. And if they know that they're going to get sued, then they will do the right thing. And so I just think if the police haven't done the right thing, when they've had this information in front of them, the case is closed as far as they're concerned. And it takes pressure, and if I'm the one that just puts, and it's not a whipping pressure, it's just a gentle, "I'm gonna keep nudging you, and if you don't wanna look at it, that's fine, but I will keep nudging you. And if new information comes forward, then I will continue to nudge you." And this case is now so old that there's not a lot of chance of getting any justice, so what we're after is truth, and that's okay as well.
I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my conversation with Vikki. It was such a powerful reminder that success doesn't always come from pushing harder or wanting it more than everyone else. Sometimes it comes from persistence, curiosity, and being willing to keep going even when the outcome isn't clear. In part 2, we go deeper into Vikki's mindset around success, goal setting, and what it really means to commit to your passion over the long haul. So if this conversation sparked something for you, make sure you're following the show so you don't miss what's coming next. And as always, if you know someone who's quietly working towards something they care about, a student, creative, or someone who just needs a reminder to back themselves, share this episode with them. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in part 2. Until then.